1979 portrait looked like a reunion until experts found something disturbing about the enslaved girl. Dr. Amanda Chen stared at the oil painting on her computer screen at the Smithsonian's Conservation Lab in Washington, D.C. It was May 2024, and she'd been analyzing 19th century American portraits for months as part of a project documenting post-Civil War art. This painting troubled her. The work, dated 1879, showed two young women, approximately 18 or 19 years old, sitting close together in a garden setting. One woman was white, dressed in an elaborate blue silk dress, her blonde hair styled fashionably. The other was black, wearing a simpler brown dress, her dark hair pulled back neatly. What struck Amanda was their positioning. They sat side by side on a stone bench, shoulders nearly touching, both smiling genuinely. It was unusual. Post-war paintings rarely showed black and white subjects with this level of intimacy and equality. The painting had been donated by the Whitfield family of Charleston, South Carolina. A brass plate read, "Margaret and Clara, 1879. The donation note explained, "This portrait was found in our grandmother's attic in 1956. Margaret Whitfield was our ancestor. The identity of Clara is unknown. The painting had been hidden away for decades." Hidden away. That phrase nagged at Amanda. She began standard conservation analysis, using X-radiography to examine the painting's layers. When the X-ray image appeared, Amanda's breath caught. There, invisible beneath layers of paint, were shapes around the black woman's wrists and ankles. Heavy, unmistakable shapes deliberately painted over. Shackles. Iron shackles. Amanda sat back, heart pounding. This wasn't just a portrait of two young women. Beneath the surface were symbols of bondage and enslavement, deliberately hidden by paint. Why would an artist paint shackles and then cover them? What was the relationship between these women? And why had this portrait been hidden for decades? Amanda called Dr. Evelyn Washington, a historian specializing in slavery-era artifacts. "I found something extraordinary. A painting from 1879 showing two friends, but X-rays reveal shackles hidden beneath the paint. I need to know who these women were." Evelyn was silent briefly. "Send me everything. If there's a story here, we'll find it." Amanda began compiling files, knowing she was about to uncover truths someone had worked hard to conceal. Evelyn arrived 2 days later carrying folders about the Whitfield family. They met in Amanda's lab, where the painting hung, looking deceptively peaceful. "Tell me what you found," Evelyn said. Amanda displayed the X-ray images. "Look, around Clara's wrists and ankles. The artist painted heavy iron shackles, then deliberately covered them with layers of paint. It took significant effort to hide them this thoroughly." Evelyn leaned closer, expression darkening. "So, originally, Clara was shown in chains beside Margaret. Then someone painted over the shackles to make them look like equals." "Exactly, but why?" Evelyn opened her folder. The Whitfields were wealthy Charleston plantation owners before the Civil War. They owned over 200 enslaved people. Margaret Whitfield was born in 1860, making her 19 in 1879. And Clara? The name doesn't appear in official Whitfield records, but I found something in their plantation records from 1860. Girl child, named Clara, born March 1860 to enslaved woman Ruth, assigned to house duties. Amanda's chest tightened. So Clara was born the same year as Margaret, on the same plantation. Yes, enslaved children were often assigned as companions to white children. They'd play together when young, though the relationship became unequal as they grew older. Evelyn continued. By 1879, Clara would have been legally free. But Reconstruction was failing, Jim Crow laws emerging. Many black women had little choice but to continue working for families that once enslaved them. Amanda studied the painting again. Two women who grew up together. One as master's daughter, one as enslaved property. By 1879, slavery is over, but the shackles remain, hidden beneath paint. "We need to find out what happened in 1879 specifically," Evelyn said. "Why was this portrait commissioned?" Over the next week, they researched. Margaret had married in 1881 and died in 1943, but Clara's story was harder to trace. Sporadic city directory mentions as domestic worker. No marriage record. No clear trail after 1885. Then Amanda found a letter tucked in the frame's back, dated June 1879. "Dearest Clara, I know this is forbidden. My parents would be furious, but I cannot bear that we'll soon be separated forever. You are my oldest friend. Though the world insists we are unequal, my heart knows otherwise. Let this painting preserve our friendship with deepest affection." They sat in silence. "They commissioned this secretly," Amanda said, "to preserve their friendship. But the shackles," Evelyn whispered. "Why paint Clara in shackles?" That was the question they needed to answer. Amanda examined every inch of canvas, finding tiny letters in painted tree bark. T.W. 1879. Evelyn searched Charleston records, finding Thomas Wright, portrait painter, studio on King Street, operating 1872-1884. More importantly, the 1870 census listed Wright as mulatto, a free person of color serving both black and white clients. "This changes everything," Evelyn said. As a black man, Wright understood the complexities. He understood what it meant for Margaret and Clara to sit together like this. Amanda studied the X-rays again. So Wright painted Clara in shackles deliberately. He was making a statement. Exactly. He was painting truth beneath appearance. On the surface, two friends. Underneath, the reality that Clara was still bound, not by literal chains, but by social, economic, and legal constraints. They found Wright's 1876 advertisement. T. Wright, portrait artist. All clients, welcome. The phrase signaled he'd paint black subjects with dignity equal to white subjects. Then Evelyn found an August 1879 newspaper article. Local artist Thomas Wright has departed Charleston for Philadelphia, seeking greater opportunities in the North. Conditions have become untenable for Negro artists here. He left right after painting this portrait, Amanda said. Not a coincidence. Evelyn nodded. Wright painted something dangerous. Margaret and Clara wanted a friendship memorial, but Wright made it more a critique, a truth powerful people wouldn't want revealed. And then he had to leave, Amanda finished. They needed to understand why this painting had been hidden for decades. Who had hidden it and why? The answer would be more heartbreaking than either imagined. The portrait wasn't just a friendship memorial. It was evidence of a tragedy the Whitfield family had worked hard to erase from history. Now, 145 years later, that tragedy was finally going to be revealed. Evelyn knew that understanding this painting required finding Clara's own words, letters, diary entries, anything documenting her perspective. She contacted the Avery Research Center in Charleston, which specialized in African American history. Their archivist, Marcus, was intrigued by the story and began searching their collections. 3 weeks later, Marcus called with news. We found something extraordinary. A collection of letters written by formerly enslaved women, donated in the 1930s by a black church. Among them are several letters written by someone named Clara, dated between 1877 and 1880. Evelyn flew to Charleston immediately. The letters were fragile, written in careful handwriting on cheap paper, the only kind Clara could afford. One letter, dated May 1879, was addressed to Margaret. Dear Margaret, I received your message about the portrait. I don't know if this is wise. Your parents would be furious if they discovered we still meet in secret. But I confess my heart leaps at the thought of sitting beside you once more as we did as children, before the world taught us we were meant to be separate. I will come. I will sit beside you one final time. Perhaps the painting will prove that what we felt was real, even if no one else understands. Your friend always, Clara. Evelyn's hands trembled reading it. This confirmed that Margaret and Clara had arranged the portrait secretly against Margaret's parents' wishes. Another letter, dated July 1879, after the portrait was painted, revealed something darker. Dear Margaret, I cannot see you anymore. Your father discovered our portrait. He came to where I work, threatened me, said terrible things. He says if I ever approach you again, he will ensure I am arrested, that I will be sent to prison or worse. I know you tried to protect me, but we were foolish to think we could preserve our friendship. The world will not allow it. Please do not try to find me. It will only bring more trouble. I must disappear for both our sakes. Remember me kindly. Clara? Evelyn felt sick. Richard Whitfield had discovered the portrait and threatened Clara to force her away from his daughter. She found one final letter, undated, but written in shakier handwriting. To whoever finds this, my name is Clara. I was born enslaved on the Whitfield plantation in 1860. Margaret Whitfield was my friend from childhood. We grew up together, played together, shared secrets. When slavery ended, I hoped things would be different. But freedom is not freedom when you're still bound by poverty, by laws that deny you rights, by people who see you as property even without chains. Margaret tried to be my friend still, tried to preserve our bond through a portrait, but her father destroyed that dream. I left Charleston because I had no choice. I write this so someone will know that I existed, that my friendship with Margaret was real, that I was more than what they tried to make me. Clara, these letters changed everything. This wasn't just about a hidden portrait. It was about two young women whose childhood friendship had been destroyed by racism, and a father who couldn't accept his daughter caring for a formerly enslaved woman. Evelyn shared the letters with Amanda, who sat in silence after reading them. The shackles in the painting, Amanda said quietly. Wright painted them because Clara was still shackled. By poverty, by Jim Crow, by men like Richard Whitfield, who would threaten and intimidate to maintain racial hierarchy. And Margaret knew it, Evelyn added. That's why she hid the painting after her father discovered it. She couldn't show it publicly, but she couldn't destroy it either. It was all she had left of Clara. To understand what happened when Richard Whitfield discovered the portrait, Evelyn searched for his personal papers. The South Carolina Historical Society held the Whitfield family collection, including Richard's correspondence from the 1870s. She found a letter Richard wrote to his wife Catherine in July 1879. I have discovered something profoundly disturbing. Margaret commissioned a portrait, without our knowledge or permission, showing herself sitting beside that Negro girl Clara who used to work here. They are positioned as equals, as friends. The artist, some mulatto from King Street, has created an abomination that suggests our daughter sees herself as equal to former slaves. I have dealt with the situation. I located Clara and made clear that any further contact with Margaret will result in severe consequences. I have also ensured the artist has left Charleston. The portrait will be destroyed. But the portrait hadn't been destroyed. Why? Evelyn found the answer in Catherine Whitfield's diary from August 1879. Richard demands I destroy Margaret's portrait. He says it is disgraceful, that it shows improper affection between our daughter and a Negro, but I cannot do it. I watched Margaret and Clara grow up together. Before the war, before everything changed, they were like sisters. I know the world says it was wrong, that Margaret should never have cared for a slave child as she did, but they were children, innocent of the divisions we adults created. Margaret has been heartbroken since Richard drove Clara away. This portrait is all she has left. I cannot destroy it. I have hidden it in the attic instead. Perhaps someday, when these bitter times have passed, it can be understood for what it truly is. A testament to a friendship that society would not allow. Catherine had saved the painting. Despite her husband's orders, despite the social pressure, she'd preserved this evidence of her daughter's love for Clara. Evelyn shared this discovery with Amanda. Catherine Whitfield was complicit in slavery, benefited from it her entire life. But even she couldn't bring herself to destroy this painting. What happened to Margaret after Clara left? Amanda asked. Evelyn had found that too. Margaret married in 1881 to a man her father chose. She had 3 children, lived conventionally. But I found something in her granddaughter's memoir, published in 1965. The granddaughter wrote, "Grandmother Margaret was a melancholy woman, often distant. She kept a locked drawer in her desk that no one was allowed to open. After she died, we found it contained letters from someone named Clara and a small portrait of them together. Mother ordered both burned, saying they were improper. I regret that we didn't preserve them. They seemed important to Grandmother." So Margaret kept Clara's letters her entire life, Amanda said softly. Locked away, hidden but treasured. And the small portrait they mentioned, that was probably a copy or a photograph of the larger painting. The family destroyed that, but they didn't know about the original hidden in the attic. The story was becoming clearer and more tragic. 2 friends torn apart by racism, one threatened into disappearance, the other forced into a conventional life while secretly mourning the loss. But what happened to Clara after she left Charleston? That was the question that still needed answering. Tracing Clara's movements after 1879 was challenging. She'd essentially disappeared from Charleston records, which was likely intentional. Richard Whitfield's threats had forced her to leave the city entirely. Evelyn contacted genealogists, specializing in African American family histories throughout the South. If Clara had moved to another city, she might have left traces, employment records, church registrations, census entries. After weeks of searching, they found a lead. Census records from Augusta, Georgia, in 1880 listed a Clara, Negro female, age 20, unmarried, works as laundress. It wasn't certain proof. Clara was a common name, but the age matched perfectly. And Augusta was close enough to Charleston that someone fleeing could reach it reasonably. Evelyn traveled to Augusta, searching through city directories and church records. At the Springfield Baptist Church archive, she found it. Clara, member since 1879, former resident of Charleston, South Carolina. The church records included a brief interview conducted in 1880 for their membership registry. When asked why she'd come to Augusta, Clara had answered, "I left Charleston to escape a situation that had become dangerous. I seek to build a new life here." Evelyn found more. Clara had worked as a laundress in Augusta for 6 years, living in a boarding house for unmarried black women. She had attended church regularly, participated in mutual aid societies, helping other formerly enslaved people. Then, in 1885, Clara's name appeared in marriage records. Clara married to Samuel, a carpenter, both of Augusta. Evelyn felt hope for the first time. Clara had found someone, built a life beyond the tragedy of losing Margaret. She traced them through census records. 1890, Clara and Samuel living in Augusta with 2 children. 1900, 4 children. Samuel working steadily as a carpenter. Clara taking in laundry to supplement income. But then Evelyn found Clara's obituary from 1903, published in the Augusta Chronicle. Clara, age 43, died of pneumonia, survived by husband Samuel and 4 children, known for her quiet dignity and kindness to all, services at Springfield Baptist Church. Clara had died at 43, relatively young even for that era. The obituary was brief, mentioning nothing of her childhood, nothing of Charleston, nothing of Margaret. But Evelyn found one more document. A letter from Samuel written to Springfield Baptist Church in 1904, donating his wife's few personal possessions to the church's historical collection. My wife Clara rarely spoke of her childhood in Charleston. She said those memories were too painful. But before she died, she told me about a friend from her youth, a white girl named Margaret who had been kind to her when kindness was rare. She said they had their portrait painted together, trying to preserve that friendship before the world tore them apart. She never saw Margaret again, but thought of her often. Clara carried that loss her entire life. I donate these letters she kept, hoping they might matter to someone someday. Those were the letters Evelyn had found in the Avery Research Center. Clara had kept them until her death, and Samuel had preserved them. Clara had built a life, married, had children, found some measure of peace, but she'd carried the loss of Margaret forever. A childhood friendship destroyed by racism, a bond that society refused to allow. Evelyn returned to Washington with this information. Now they had both sides of the story. Margaret, forced into a conventional life while secretly keeping Clara's letters locked away. Clara, building a new life in Augusta, but never forgetting the friend she'd lost. And between them, Hidden in an attic for decades, a portrait that captured one brief moment when they'd sat together as equals, trying to preserve something the world wouldn't allow them to keep. Amanda continued analyzing the painting with new understanding. Using infrared reflectography, she could see even more details beneath the surface layers. The shackles around Clara's wrists weren't just symbolic. They were painted with extraordinary detail, suggesting Wright had seen real shackles up close, understood their weight and mechanism. But there was something else, Amanda discovered. Faint lettering beneath the paint layers, hidden in the shadows of the painted garden. She enhanced the image, adjusting contrast until words emerged. Though the chains are hidden, they remain. 1879. Wright had written this message beneath the paint, knowing it would be invisible but permanently part of the painting's truth. Amanda also found that Wright had painted tears on Clara's face originally, tiny tears at the corners of her eyes, then painted over them to make her expression appear happy. The X-rays showed those hidden tears clearly. He painted the truth first, Amanda explained to Evelyn. Clara sitting beside Margaret, shackled and crying. Then he painted over it to create the version they could actually keep. Two friends smiling together, but the truth remained underneath, permanent. "It's brilliant and heartbreaking," Evelyn said. Wright gave them the painting they wanted while preserving the reality beneath it. They researched Thomas Wright further, finding he'd settled in Philadelphia and continued painting until his death in 1891. His obituary mentioned he'd been known for portraits capturing the dignity of Negro subjects and the complex realities of freedom after slavery. Wright had painted dozens of similar works, portraits of formerly enslaved people where X-ray analysis might reveal hidden truths beneath the surface. His paintings were acts of documentation and resistance, appearing acceptable on the surface while preserving harsh realities underneath. Amanda and Evelyn decided to present their findings at a joint conference of art historians and scholars of African American history. The revelation about the hidden shackles would challenge how people understood post-Civil War portraiture. But first, they needed to do something else: find Clara's descendants. If Clara had 4 children in Augusta, those children might have had families of their own. Somewhere, Clara's great-great-grandchildren might be living, completely unaware of this story. Evelyn contacted genealogists in Augusta, providing Clara's married name and her children's names from census records. The search would take time, but if they could find Clara's family and tell them this story, it would make the discovery complete. Meanwhile, Amanda prepared the painting for exhibition. The Smithsonian wanted to display it with the X-ray images, showing the public how the shackles had been hidden beneath layers of paint, how Wright had documented a truth while appearing to create a conventional portrait. 3 months later, Evelyn received a call from a genealogist in Augusta. "We found them. Clara's great-great-granddaughter is named Michelle. She lives in Atlanta, teaches history at a high school. I told her about your research. She wants to meet you." Evelyn and Amanda flew to Atlanta the following week, bringing photographs of the painting and all the documents they discovered. Michelle was a woman in her 40s with Clara's same gentle eyes visible in the portrait. When they showed her the painting, she stared for a long time in silence. "That's my great-great-grandmother," she whispered. "I've heard stories that she'd been enslaved as a child in Charleston, that she'd left suddenly and never talked much about her past. But we never knew why." They showed her the letters, the documents, the X-rays revealing the hidden shackles. Michelle cried reading Clara's words, learning about the friendship with Margaret, understanding why her ancestor had carried such sadness. "She lost her friend," Michelle said. "A childhood friend ripped away because of racism, and she carried that loss for 43 years until she died." "Yes," Evelyn confirmed, "but she also survived, built a life, had a family." "You exist because Clara was strong enough to start over in Augusta," Michelle nodded slowly. "What happened to Margaret's family? Are there descendants?" "Yes," Amanda said. "The Whitfield family still exists in Charleston. We haven't contacted them yet. We wanted to speak with you first." "I want to meet them," Michelle said firmly. "I want Margaret's descendants to know that Clara never forgot their ancestor, that the friendship was real, that it mattered." Evelyn contacted the Whitfield family, explaining what they'd discovered about the portrait. After initial hesitation, Margaret's great-great-grandson David agreed to meet. They arranged a meeting at the Smithsonian, where the painting was being prepared for exhibition. David Whitfield arrived looking uncomfortable, a tall man in his 50s with blonde hair like Margaret in the portrait. Michelle was already there, standing before the painting, studying the image of her ancestor. David approached slowly, looking at the portrait for the first time. "My family donated this painting years ago. We never knew the full story, just that it had been hidden in our grandmother's attic." "Your family tried to erase this story," Michelle said, her voice controlled but firm. "Your ancestor, Richard Whitfield, threatened my ancestor, forced her to leave Charleston, destroyed her friendship with his daughter." David looked down. "I know. Dr. Washington shared the documents. I'm ashamed of what my ancestor did. But Margaret, my great-great-grandmother, she tried to preserve this. She kept Clara's letters locked away her entire life. She kept letters while living in comfort," Michelle replied. "My ancestor lost everything, her friend, her home, her childhood. She had to start over in a strange city with nothing." The tension was thick. Evelyn intervened gently. Both women were victims of a system that wouldn't allow their friendship. Margaret couldn't defy her father openly without being disowned. Clara had no power to fight back. The real villain was the racism that made their friendship impossible. They stood together silently, looking at the painting where their ancestors sat side by side, smiling, preserved in a moment of equality that the world had refused to allow them in life. Finally, David spoke. I want to help correct this. My family has resources. We could create a scholarship in Clara's name, could support the exhibition, could ensure her story is told alongside Margaret's. Michelle considered this. Clara didn't want charity. She wanted dignity, equality, the right to be friends with someone without facing threats and violence. I understand, David said, but I can't change the past. I can only try to honor these women's memory now. They tried to preserve their friendship through this painting. It can help tell their story. Michelle finally nodded. All right, but Clara's story is told fully, not sanitized, not made comfortable. The truth about the shackles, the threats, the loss, everything. Everything, David agreed. Over the next months, they worked together planning the exhibition. Michelle provided family photos of Clara's descendants, documents from Clara's life in Augusta. David provided Whitfield family records, including Catherine's diary and Margaret's life story. The exhibition would show the painting with x-rays revealing the hidden shackles, display letters from both women, and trace what happened to each of them after their forced separation. It would also show contemporary photographs, Michelle standing before her students, teaching African American history, David at his architecture firm in Charleston, designing affordable housing, both of them living full lives made possible by ancestors who'd survived impossible circumstances. The title of the exhibition was chosen carefully, Hidden Chains, a friendship that survived on canvas, though it could not survive in life. Before the opening, Michelle and David stood together before the painting one final time. They look happy here, Michelle said quietly. In this one moment, captured by an artist who understood their truth, they got to be just two friends sitting together. Right gave them that gift, David agreed, even while painting the reality of the shackles underneath. I hope they knew, Michelle said. I hope Margaret and Clara somehow knew that 145 years later, their descendants would stand here together telling their story, honoring what they tried to preserve. They stood in silence, two people connected by a friendship their ancestors had shared briefly before the world tore it apart, now working together to ensure that friendship was finally remembered and honored. The exhibition opened at the Smithsonian in March 2025. The gallery was packed. Historians, art conservators, descendants of enslaved people, journalists, and visitors who'd heard about the hidden shackles revealed beneath the portrait's surface. The painting hung in the center of the main wall, spotlighted. On either side were large displays. On the left, the X-ray images showing the shackles around Clara's wrists and ankles, the hidden tears on her face, Wright's secret message beneath the paint. On the right, the final version visitors saw two women sitting peacefully together, smiling. The exhibition text explained, in 1879, two young women who'd grown up together on a South Carolina plantation, one as the master's daughter, one as enslaved property, secretly commissioned this portrait to preserve their childhood friendship. Margaret Whitfield and Clara were both 19 years old, 14 years after slavery's end. They hoped this painting would prove their bond was real, even as society insisted they remain separate and unequal. The artist, Thomas Wright, a free man of color, painted a profound truth. He first depicted Clara in shackles, tears on her face, showing the reality that freedom hadn't ended her bondage to poverty, racism, and social constraints. Then he painted over these elements, creating the peaceful scene the women could actually keep. But beneath the paint, the truth remained, permanent, undeniable, waiting 145 years to be revealed. Visitors moved through the exhibition quietly, reading letters from both women, learning about Richard Whitfield's threats, discovering how the painting had been hidden for decades. One section displayed Clara's life after Charleston, her marriage, her children, Samuel's letter preserving her memory. Another section showed Margaret's life, the conventional marriage, the locked drawer containing Clara's letters, the granddaughter's account of burning those letters after Margaret's death. The exhibition also featured Thomas Wright's story, his other portraits, his flight to Philadelphia, his death in 1891. Several other Wright paintings were displayed alongside, and infrared analysis suggested they too might contain hidden truths beneath their surfaces. But the most powerful moment came in the final room, where large photographs showed Michelle and David standing together before the portrait, their own stories displayed alongside their ancestors. Michelle had written a statement. My great-great-grandmother, Clara, survived slavery, survived being torn from her childhood friend, survived threats and poverty and racism. She built a life in Augusta, raised 4 children, and passed down to her descendants a legacy of resilience. I teach history because Clara believed in education, because she understood that telling the truth about the past, stories are hidden, erased, forgotten. But Clara's story survived. It survived in letters, in a painting beneath a painting, in the memories passed down through generations. And now her story will be known. David had written, my great-great-grandmother Margaret tried to preserve a friendship the world wouldn't allow. She failed. Racism and her father's cruelty destroyed what she and Clara had built. But she never stopped caring. She kept Clara's letters locked away for 60 years, unable to share them but unable to destroy them. Margaret was complicit in a system of oppression by her position and privilege, even as she personally cared for someone that system oppressed. Her story is complicated, uncomfortable, but it's important to tell, to show how racism harmed everyone, even those who benefited from it in material ways. I can't undo what my ancestor Richard did, but I can honor what Margaret tried to preserve and what Clara survived. The exhibition became one of the Smithsonian's most visited. News coverage was extensive. Scholars began analyzing other Thomas Wright paintings, discovering more hidden truths. The story of Margaret and Clara sparked conversations about childhood friendships across racial lines, about how slavery's end didn't end racism's harm, about the complicated relationships between white and black women in the post-war South. 6 months after the exhibition opened, Michelle received a package at her Atlanta home. Inside was a letter from an elderly woman in Charleston named Patricia. Dear Michelle, I'm 92 years old, and I was Clara's youngest daughter. Yes, your great-grandmother. I'm still alive. I saw the exhibition news and wanted you to know that I remember my mother. She died when I was 3, but I have one memory. She showed me a small drawing she'd kept hidden, a sketch of herself and another young woman sitting together. She told me, this was my friend Margaret. The world said we couldn't be friends, but we were. Remember that. The world is often wrong about who deserves love. I've kept that drawing for 89 years. I'm sending it to you now. It should be with the portrait. Michelle opened the package with shaking hands. Inside, wrapped carefully, was a small pencil sketch on aged paper. It showed 2 young girls, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, holding hands and smiling. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, Margaret and Clara, 1867. They'd drawn this themselves as children, 12 years before the formal portrait, when their friendship was still innocent and the full weight of racial hierarchy hadn't yet crushed them. Michelle immediately contacted Amanda and Evelyn. The sketch was added to the exhibition, displayed in a case with Patricia's letter, showing that even 3-year-old Patricia had absorbed her mother's message about friendship across racial lines. Michelle visited Patricia in Charleston. The elderly woman cried, seeing photographs of her mother's descendants. 4 generations Patricia had never met, all thriving, all educated, all carrying forward Clara's legacy. Mama would be so proud, Patricia whispered. She always said education was everything, that we had to learn and grow and never let anyone make us feel small. She learned that from her childhood, Michelle explained. Margaret taught her to read when they were children, before it was discovered and punished. That's why your mother valued education so deeply, Patricia nodded. Mama never forgot Margaret. Even at the end, she spoke about her friend from childhood. She said some friendships are so true that not even the world's cruelty can completely destroy them. The exhibition was extended another year due to popular demand. Schools brought students to see it, using Margaret and Clara's story to teach about slavery's legacy, racism's persistence, and the human capacity for connection across artificial divides. Michelle and David became friends themselves, a friendship forged through their shared work honoring their ancestors. They spoke together at conferences, wrote articles together, advocated together for teaching difficult histories honestly. 5 years after the exhibition opened, Michelle published a book, Hidden Chains, My Great-Great-Grandmother's Story and the Friendship That Survived in Paint. The book combined Clara's letters, the painting's history, and Michelle's own reflections on what it meant to discover this story. In the book's final chapter, Michelle wrote, I teach my students that history isn't just dates and events. It's people, relationships, love and loss and survival. Margaret and Clara loved each other as children before the world taught them they shouldn't. They tried to preserve that love through a portrait, but racism was stronger. Clara lost her friend, her home, everything familiar. But she didn't let that loss destroy her. She built a new life, raised children, passed down stories and values that reached me 5 generations later. The shackles Thomas Wright painted weren't just historical. They represented chains that still exist in different forms. But Clara's resilience, her refusal to be defined only by what was done to her, that resilience also survives. It survives in me, in my students, in everyone who learns her story and refuses to let histories like hers be forgotten. The portrait remained at the Smithsonian, the X-rays permanently displayed beside it. Visitors from around the world came to see it, to see the friendship captured on the surface, the shackles hidden beneath, the truth Thomas Wright had preserved across 145 years. And, in Atlanta, Michelle kept Patricia's childhood sketch in her office at school, showing it to students, telling them about 2 little girls who'd held hands and drawn pictures together, not yet knowing that the world would try to tear them apart. But look, she'd tell her students, pointing at the sketch, then at photographs of the formal portrait. They fought to stay connected. Margaret commissioned that painting. Clara kept the letters. Thomas Wright painted the truth underneath. And now, all these years later, we know their story. We know they mattered. We know their friendship was real. The chains were hidden, she'd continue. But so was the resistance. So was the love. So was the truth. And truth has a way of surviving, even when buried beneath layers of paint.